In this video, we're going to show you the actual building of the folding plate assembly. Again, these are the parts that come with the kit for the folding plate assembly. If your handles are built, if you've already done that or someone's done it for you, these parts are replaced by your handles. And if you did the handles, you are about halfway through the completion of the folding plate assembly. What we show you in this video, we encourage people to do it. It's actually a fit check. You should do this prior to painting your hinges, especially if you're going to be having these parts powder coated. Okay, some of your parts might look slightly different depending on the version of your folding plate assembly that you receive, but the guiding item is the drawing. The drawing has the exact illustrations. In fact, this is what the parts are made to. These are what we pull. Let's go ahead and take a look at this in a little bit more detail. The drawing is multiple sheets showing different views of the folding plate assembly. Each view includes item numbers showing the part numbers that go into the assembly. This is the top view, this is the bottom view. Anytime you have to make or modify a part, like let's take for example the seat tracks. You receive a seat track that looks like this. You're going to be making a couple cuts as dimensioned in the drawing and drilling an additional hole to come up with the part that's actually used on the folding plate assembly. Similar with the handles. When you build up your handles, illustrates each of the items that go into the handles. You may have your handles already built by now, but what I'd like to talk about is the two last pages, the bill of materials and the kit packing list. The bill of materials includes the item number that goes into the assembly, where the packing list is what we actually pull from stock. In a lot of cases, it's a direct one-to-one. Like let's say, for example, all the fasteners. It's the same part number here as it is over here. Let's say going back to the seat tracks. To control inventory, this has a unique part number. After you go ahead and cut it, as described earlier, it's going to have a different part number. Okay. Seat, pardon me, the hinge parts. You receive one rack. It has one unique part number, but when you cut it, it's going to have 4 unique part numbers. These are the tools you're going to need to build the folding plate assembly. Hacksaw for cutting seat tracks, also the hinge plates, but actually for the hinge plates, separating the 4 hinge plates from each rack, I prefer a Dremel tool with a cutting wheel. Putting things together, you're going to need some metric sockets, a couple metric open-end wrenches, and also metric Allen wrenches. For the 2 holes you need to drill, just a 3/8 inch, 0.375 inch drill bit. Most people don't have metric drill bits, and there's no need for that. Hammer center punch for marking the hole you're going to drill. Measuring scale. Also a build sander or some type of a grinder comes in very handy for cleaning up your hinge plates and also your seat tracks. Before we begin sawing away on our hinge parts, let me explain something. There's a set of tabs that we need to remove. We're going to be removing the tabs that join each of the 4 sections. Okay, so these real thin sections here. The sections in here are actually part of the hinge plate. We don't want to remove these. Okay, so here's the tabs that we're going to be removing. Also, there's short tabs that protrude out from the end of each of these. Okay, we want to remove those. What these are for, okay, the tabs here join the 4 sections together. The tabs here serve as kind of like a register where we can line up our brake when we bend our rack of 4 parts. That way it assures the quality of the bend or the location of the bend, and it reduces the cost for everybody. Okay, so let's get cutting, and again, remove these tabs and these tabs, but this area right in here, we want to keep that section. That's actually part of the hinge plate. Okay, time to saw. I finished the 8 hinge parts. I went ahead and broke the edge all the way around. I did not round it. Just breaking the edge works out fine. A lot of these parts are going to be mated together flush. It took me about an hour to cut these, to separate them, and to go ahead and clean them up on the belt sander. I went through 3 or 4 of these cutoff saw wheels in doing so. Okay, a couple of the parts, you will notice that there is a boss welded in place. You'll see some discoloration from the TIG welding process. I would not worry about that. These parts are going to be primed and painted, or in some cases some of you will be powder coating them. What this feature's for is just to reinforce the area where the indexing pin threads in. Okay, so that locks the car either when it's unfolded in the driving position or when it's folded. You'll see that in some later videos. Okay, I consider these hinges, they are done. So we're ready for our next step. Taking a look at the seat tracks, as we mentioned earlier, let's go look at our drawing. Again, we're going to cut these to length, cut off each end, and we're going to drill one hole. Let's go ahead and do so. With our seat tracks cut to length and drilled, there's an additional operation we need to do to the front aluminum plate to accommodate the rivet that sticks out of the bottom face of the seat track that has a locking mechanism. Keep in mind, this locks the seat or allows it to move forward and backwards to adjust the height of the driver. But this rivet, we can't have this rocking on this plate when we tighten down the bolts that go through here. So what we do is we just mark on our aluminum plate where to drill a hole just big enough and just deep enough. We don't want to go all the way through the plate to accommodate this rivet so it will lay flat. Your drawing will have one sheet that looks like this. Basically it shows the front plate and also this one seat track with the handle on it. It shows kind of like an exploded view of that, as you can see in here. So what we want to do, this hole here is the back hole of our plate. It just shows that we want to match drill a hole for this rivet to fit into. Again, we just want to go to a diameter and a depth that is just enough so that this rivet fits into it without an interference. If any question, you want to go a little bit bigger, then a little bit smaller. For starters, I'm drawing a line between the center of these two holes of the front plate. Not the back plate, but the front plate. On the side that the handle will be going on. So we want the handle to be pulling out. If it's on the inside, it's not going to be accessible underneath the seat. It has to be on the outside, or the right-hand side of this plate, if you're looking forward. So I'm just going to put a line in here. Then I'm going to look at where my rivet is, and I can either measure it from the center or eyeball it one way or the other. I want to mark right along there where this rivet is going to go. A little deeper. Okay, I drilled my hole. Of course, it doesn't go all the way through. I match up my part and see how it fits. Now, one thing that can be kind of deceptive is when this operation is done, that this surface might be just slightly out of flat. One way you can get a feel for that is line up the rivet with one of the through holes. And there you can kind of see how this part is not perfectly flat. So just drill it so the rivet fits in there. I would not worry about trying to flatten this thing, and if it is slightly out of flat, I would not worry about it, and I just go on to our next step. I start putting the folding plate assembly together, starting with the hinges. Okay, these hinges have been painted just with the primer and aerosol spray black paint. Again, you can powder coat them, but the main thing is you want to do this prior to your paint. These parts have already been put together once, but I'm just repeating this process even though the parts are painted. Okay, so I lay out the parts just the way you see them in the drawing, in the same orientation as the drawing, upside down. There's no two identical parts. Sometimes it takes a little bit to make sure you get, just to get the parts in the right spot, but it is not too complex after you've done it once or twice. Okay, the fasteners that I'm going to be working with are the shoulder bolts. For each shoulder bolt, you're going to have, the shoulder bolts are 8 millimeters in diameter on the main part and then 6 on the threaded portion. You're going to have 2 washers at 8 millimeter and 1 washer at 6 and a 6 millimeter nut for each of the 4 shoulder bolts. So I'm starting with the center hole. When you do get to paint, you have to recall, you just want to make sure that you mask your threaded hole for the insert. As you can see, this hole right here, just the threaded portion. Everything else, including the holes, we typically go ahead and paint. Okay, so an 8mm washer on the head side of the shoulder bolt, on the other side, and then follow up with the 6. And then we go ahead and we torque these down. So I'm not going to tighten this down all the way. I'm just going to thread it down finger tight. Until you get to the point you're actually finally doing it, you want to just try and reduce the number of times you thread and unthread on the nylon insert. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to finish up this one with the shoulder bolt that actually lines up when the part's fully extended. Same combination of washers and nut. Okay, you can see it pivots about one shoulder bolt and it locks against the other one. When you look at the part, it makes a little bit more sense when you see the slot in there. And then the indexing pin is used to lock it in the 2 positions. Okay, let's go ahead and repeat on the other side. Take off my masking for the threaded portion. Notice for this, I just kind of pull it away from flat. Just makes it a slight easier to put together. Oops, I forgot my initial washer. Somebody in Tip City's in trouble. But it's not me. Okay, that's it for the hinges, except with the exception of the indexing pins. What I'll put in those in just a moment. Okay, I pulled the remaining items from the kit for the folding plate assembly, and also pulled in the items that we've already built, like the handles. You definitely want to have these complete by the time you get to this stage. Okay. And look at the drawing and start fitting things together just as we describe here. I'm going to start with the front plate. Notice the difference between the front. The rear plate has a little bit more point to it, and the extra 3 holes. We'll get to that. I'm going to set that aside. Okay. So it's pointing towards you, or the front of the car. Starting with our seat track, with our rivet and our handle, we want that pointing forward as well. The fasteners that come with this, there's going to be a set of 8 high-strength socket head cap screws. Each one comes with 2 washers and a nut, a lock nut. So let's fit some of this into place. The decision to go metric on everything, we didn't take that lightly. We really thought about it for a while, but we didn't want to have a mix of parts. So we're trying to make everything metric on the car. Okay, this will go with this hinge. Okay, each 8mm bolt's got a washer and a nut on the back side. A little bit tricky until you get a first set of parts together. Then it holds together a little bit better. Okay. These holes here for side lights, we'll be showing you. Those will go in a later video as we get towards the final assembly of the car. Okay, my second seat track, I'm lining it up just so cosmetically it looks the same. This extra slot, which is not used, I'm just going to put it where it lines with that slot and repeat. Okay, notice our hinges, we've kind of got a wide for the front, narrow for the back. Again, a washer on the back, a nut, same thing on the other side. Okay, that's all of the parts that go into the front assembly. So we want to repeat with the back. But now in the back, we've got the handles. Okay. Let's see. So we go handles, then, pardon me, the plate, handle, and then into the hinge. Seems like the hassle factor goes down as you get more parts together. I'm going to try to flip this around so you can kind of see from a different perspective. Okay. Handle. I should have put that, I got ahead of myself and did not put a nut on the other one. Okay, washer, followed by nut. Okay, at this point, do a couple approaches. I go ahead and tighten down the, in fact, we'll do that right now. I'm going to tighten down my shoulder bolts that hold the two hinges together. Again, starting with the center. Now everything, the shoulder bolt, the washer should bottom out against the shoulder on the bolt. So even after you torque these down, the hinge should be able to move freely. If not, you want to, let's say that the thickness of your paint is thicker than what we've accounted for here, you may want to remove one washer. Again, the shoulder bolts, they're not loaded up in tension, they're loaded up in shear. So being loose is really what you want in this case. Also, these shoulder bolts are alloy steel. They're not stainless steel. Alloy steel actually has a higher shear strength, a higher yield strength than stainless steel does. So you might see a little bit of rust forming on the shoulder bolts. It's a trade-off. We wanted the higher margins with the higher strength bolts. I touch it up with a little bit of Scotch-Brite if that gets to be an issue. But again, these fasteners, even though I torque them down, you can still see they're loose within the hinge, and the hinge is able to rotate. Okay, let's move on and torque down our 8mm socket head cap screws. If you're just doing your fit check, like your parts aren't painted, so I recommend doing this as a fit check. Again, I wouldn't tighten them down at this point. Once you're confident everything's good, it's not like you need to clean anything up, I would just do them finger tight, then disassemble it, and then paint your parts. But now, since this is going to go on a car, after this video, with the parts being painted, so I'm going to torque them down. May want to just like lightly snug them up and then come back and finally tighten them up. Installing the tail light adapter is pretty straightforward. 3 6mm screws, washers and nuts. Again, a washer on each side of the screw. So this part is to hang the tail light. In some cases, depending on your battery configuration, it can hold a rear battery box. And also, sometimes people have the accessory of a rear basket. This can be an attachment point for that as well. Otherwise, it really wouldn't protrude that far back behind the car. But just to support the accessories, the longer extension tail light adapter works out well. Okay, as we move on to tightening the side with the seat tracks, okay, if you look at our drawing, the first sheet of the drawing for the folding plate assembly, you will see a dimension between these two seat tracks. The reason for that is we want to be able to match up the seat tracks with the seat. So, okay, so if you wear glasses, this is the time to get them. So I'm going to tighten up one side and then move on to the other. So I'm just kind of lining this up with the edge for my first track. Or line it where it's parallel to the first, where the track is parallel to the aluminum plate. Okay, now I have less stuff wiggling around. Now I'm just going to take the slack out of my remaining two fasteners, just where I can still move them if need be. That's a little too tight. The key thing is we want to have this seat track and this seat track parallel. If they're not parallel, when it comes to putting your seat on, things are not going to go well. And keep in mind, the whole intention of this is so you can have your seat as adjustable. You can slide it forwards and backwards, and also your seat is easy to remove. If you need to come back and adjust this, it's very doable, but it's just nice to try and get it right the first time. Okay. I'm not too far off. Okay, that looks pretty good. And tighten things up. Okay, our indexing pins are reasonably straightforward. You might want to play with them a little bit, see how they work. There's just basically two settings. Here's the pins pulled back within the housing, and then you twist it a bit any direction, and then the whole knob slides forward and the pin extends out beyond the thread. So let's go ahead and thread these into place. Then hopefully I've got a wrench around here the proper size, but torque them down. Okay, so the hinge can fold, but then when it's in the locked position, okay, there you can see how it is locked. In the event for handling the car, you want to keep it from folding up, you basically slide the pin in. Okay, now we are the same on the other side. Okay, now recall from our earlier discussions, I think I showed you in CAD, that when the car is folded up, basically the two halves fold together. Okay, so you roll it around. Okay, currently there's no hole. We didn't laser cut a hole in these parts for this indexing pin to fit within. And the reason for that is because if we laser cut that, and if your limbs are a little bit different shape than ours, and let's say your car folded up was like this versus like that, or you know, just slightly different, the pin's not going to line up. So there's a last remaining operation where with your limbs on, your wheels on, everything like that, you're going to fold the car up, you're going to remove this indexing pin, and then you're going to match drill a hole for that pin to go into. It's not very hard, but it's just a later operation. Okay, so the pin goes in the other side. Let's take a look at a close-up and just see how, just a double check of everything. Okay, that wraps up this assembly. Kind of one thing I didn't show you actually doing it live, but I went back and I torqued down every bolt, especially these 8mm bolts here and in here. Those are highly loaded bolts, so if you see perspiration running down my face, that's what that's from. But if you go back and look, do an inspection, make sure you have washers underneath every nut. I did find one that I was missing one, so I went ahead and reinstalled that. All my bolts should protrude above the nuts the same amount. We leave at least two full threads whenever we design a fastener nut combination to make sure that the self-locking feature engages properly. And make sure everything's tight, everything fits. So I got my two indexing pins. Make sure your indexing pins lock in when your plates are unfolded, and this thing is ready to go. Anyway, thank you for watching, and bye for now.